Hey, what's going on? I'm sick, so I have to do this now. Faints.
Why Titanic's tragic sister ship sank. Everyone knows the story of the Titanic, but not many people know that the Titanic had two sister ships, and that on the night of its sinking, one of them rushed to help but didn't make it in time. Bad luck seemed to follow the trio of ships, but each one of them had glorious moments that live in the minds of those who sailed in them. Keep watching to discover a story of awe, ingenuity, and ill fate. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us on the bright.
I'm gonna say what a store travel said here. Imagine if I did this in my videos. Hey guys, subscribe to Titanic Studios to enjoy us on the bright side of life.
You know how the Titanic hit the iceberg, how the band played to the end, and how the whole tragedy unfolded. But before it happened, it would have seemed impossible for such a ship to meet the end it did. None of the events could have been foreseen by the White Star Line, the company who built the Titanic.
Okay. They didn't build it. Harland and Wolff built them. White Star Line owned the Titanic, but they didn't build them.
Had high hopes for what the unsinkable ship and its sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic, would accomplish. The Olympic was the first of the trio to set sail on June 11, 1911, heading toward New York. The sheer size of it would wow the crowds. The Olympic's maiden voyage went without incident, and a crowd of 8,000 people in New York got to explore its luxurious accommodations while it was docked there. There were high expectations for the massive ship, but just 2 months later, the Olympic crashed with HMS Hawke. The Hawke got the brunt of the damage, as the bow was left flat as a pancake. After the crash, the Olympic made its way slowly back to Belfast, where the Titanic was being constructed. On the dock, people could see the two.
Here, historic travels explain this too. But here, this was the second time Olympic, and this one through a propeller blade. The first time, I'll put an image of this in editing, but no. But this time, Olympic through a propeller blade. The last
enormous ships side by side, as parts of the Titanic were used to get the Olympic back in shape. A rare sight to behold. On April 14, 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg. Minutes later, the crew radioed nearby ships for help. That night, the Olympic was returning from New York when it received the distress signal. The ship turned around and rushed at full speed toward the Titanic. But they were so far away that they would have arrived the next night. At some point during the early hours.
Where's the rear mast tower? Huh? Where's the rear mast tower? Wait. There's a photo of Titanic, I think.
Of April 15, 1912, the crew of the Olympic decided they wouldn't make it in time and halted their course.
No. They didn't do that. Okay, give me 1 second. I gotta get my model ships. So they were here, and they messaged the Canadian. Hey, do you want me to pick up Titanic's passenger? He said. So they asked Bruce Ismay to do it. I said, no, don't, because imagine if this happened. You just survived the sinking, and then, and then this thing pulls up to rescue you. Someone would probably get a heart attack, pass out or something if that happened. So Bruce Ismay said, don't, because they would be pretty surprised. Someone would probably get a heart attack that night. They didn't hold their course, okay? They didn't go. We're not gonna make it in time. Just ignore Titanic.
The survivors of the Titanic were eventually rescued by the Carpathia.
Yep.
The Olympic was set up with lifeboats for all crew and passengers.
This is the Olympic. This just looks like Carpathia with 3 funnels. This is not at all what Olympic looked like.
Passengers after the Titanic sank. It went from having 20 lifeboats to 64.
I don't know the true lifeboat
Changes were
count,
also
but
made to the watertight
Titanic
bulkheads,
had 18
and an
lifeboats.
extra hull was installed to construct a type of double hull.
Yeah.
It was determined that a double hull would have kept the Titanic from sinking. For several years, the Olympic was used in the war effort against Germany. Throughout the years, she carried over 200,000 passengers,
This is not the Olympic.
including
This is a
thousands of
random
Americans
transport
fleeing from Europe and troops battling during World War I. One of the most significant moments for this ship was when it struck a German
Really?
submarine
The
and
sub
sank it.
looked like that.
It was discovered that the submarine was preparing to fire a torpedo on the Olympic before she rammed it. The Olympic ended up sailing the seas for 3 decades, earning her the nickname of the Old Reliable,
Of course,
despite
yeah,
some
they
previous
got the name
accidents.
right.
It went on to help the survivors on the HMS Audacious when
Was it
it was sinking,
Audacious?
and to do what it couldn't do for its sister, the Titanic. Eventually, bad luck caught up with the Olympic. The ship crashed with the Nantucket lightship, and the crash signaled the beginning of the end.
No.
Beaten up, and after years of service,
Her machinery was not that bad. She was fine. Just scrapping her would bring 100,000 jobs. Because remember, the Great Depression was going on.
the Olympic was demolished and scrapped for parts. The Old Reliable saw many years of service and thousands of passengers, but the Britannic's journey was shorter-lived. When the Titanic sank, the White Star Line was faced with a problem, since they already had another enormous ship in the works. The White Star Line began construction on HMHS Britannic on November 30, 1911, around 4 months before the Titanic sank. Although the Britannic was the youngest of the trio of ships, having been constructed last, it was also the biggest. They intended to name it Gigantic. However,
really know
after
if
the
they named it
Titanic's disaster,
Gigantic.
they changed the name to the Britannic, since they considered it to be a lucky name. With the Titanic sinking, the White Star Line underwent rigorous investigations, and many changes were made to the Britannic's design.
Okay.
She looked
That's no
very
opportunity.
similar to the Titanic, and had the largest marine turbine in the world at the time, able to reach faster speeds than the Olympic.
Do not know if
With the
that's true or
Titanic's
not.
fate fresh in their minds, everything possible was done to ensure the safety of this newer ship. The Britannic was eventually launched on February 26, 1914, almost 2 years after the Titanic met her end. After the Titanic's disaster, the White Star Line wanted the Britannic to redeem their name. She was on her way to becoming a successful ship and transported passengers for over a year and a half, when the British government requisitioned her and turned her into a hospital ship at the beginning of World War I. The ship became an even more impressive sight to look at. It was painted all white with huge red crosses on its side to indicate that it was a hospital ship. One of the ship's surgeons, Dr. J.C.H. Beaumont, thought of it as the most wonderful hospital ship that ever sailed the seas. It could treat as many as 3,309 patients at once. This is how the Britannic became His Majesty's Hospital Ship, or HMHS Britannic.
Where's the green line?
Though the sight of this magnificent ship must have put a smile on a wounded soldier's face, the Britannic didn't operate for long. Just a year after it was turned into a hospital ship, the Britannic was making its way through the Aegean Sea to pick up wounded soldiers when it was struck by a loud explosion. The passengers didn't know what had happened, but headed to the deck to disembark. It is unclear what hit the Britannic, but the consensus is that it was struck by a mine left by a German U-boat. though some still believe a torpedo hit it. The captain tried to move the ship to a nearby beach, but the ship was sinking fast. In desperation and against the captain's orders, several crew members launched lifeboats and disembarked. Sadly, since the ship was moving and the propellers working, the lifeboats were sucked in and destroyed by the propellers.
That's very true.
Though so much effort had gone into ensuring the Britannic was safer than the Titanic. Whatever explosion occurred left the Britannic in the same dire condition as the Titanic in just 10 minutes. In a cruel twist of fate, it also sank in the ocean.
Of course,
Unlike the Titanic's large death toll, only 30 people perished in the sinking of the Britannic. Over 1,000 survived. So many people survived because the accident happened in the morning when the temperature of the water was warmer. In addition, the Greek island of Kea was near enough to offer help. In the end, the Britannic only sailed the seas for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
The bad luck that followed the Titanic and the Britannic, and the accident and demise of the Olympic were remarkable. But what was most impressive is that there was a woman who sailed on all 3 ships and survived. Violet Jessup was a crew member and nurse aboard the ships. She was there when the Olympic collided with HMS Hawke in 1911 and disembarked safely. 2 years later, she escaped the sinking of the Titanic in lifeboat number 16, and she showed some women that it was safe to board the lifeboats. You'd imagine that would have been enough to keep her from ever getting on a boat again, but not for her. A few years later, she served as a nurse on the Britannic while it was used as a hospital ship. When the explosion occurred, Violet jumped overboard and was pulled under by the water and hit her head on the keel, but she survived. Can you imagine her experience? She must have had nerves of steel. Nowadays, the trolls of the internet would probably have instead called Violet a jinx because of her being on board all 3 ships when they had their darkest moments. All in all, the trio of ships saw journeys of triumph and tragedy. Ill fate may have followed them, but all the survivors were left with incredible stories to tell. So, Brightsiders, tell us, would you have liked to see any of these ships in real life? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to give this video a like, share it with your friends, and click subscribe to stay on the bright side.
What am I watching?